What if a single, forgotten word could change your entire life's trajectory? Leo Rossi, mid-tour amidst the sun-baked stones of the Roman Forum, corrected a tourist's misinterpretation with an obscure Latin phrase, *tempus edax rerum. Time, the devourer of all things. In the distance, a man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, Elias Thorne, paused. His gaze, sharp and unreadable, fixed on Leo. Ever feel trapped by a life that isn't truly yours? The aroma of espresso, thick and sweet, did little to invigorate Leo as he stirred his weak coffee in a bustling Roman cafe. Across the worn wooden table, Maya, his friend and flatmate, scrolled through her phone. Another day, another herd of fanny packs, she quipped, her smile bright, despite the city's relentless hum. Leo offered a tired smile in return. At least they paid for the gelato, Maya nudged him. You know, your wasted talent could write a book about these people. Or, actually use your brain for something other than tourist trivia. He just shrugged, pushing the thought away like an unwelcome memory. What happens when your entire life's ambition is stolen from you? That evening, in the cramped Trastevere apartment he shared with Maya, Leo found himself drawn to the dusty bookshelf. His fingers traced the spines of old textbooks, Livy, Tacitus, a worn copy of Historia Augusta. Piles of academic papers, yellowed at the edges, lay beneath a framed, faded degree from La Sapienza. This was the ghost of a life, a painful whisper of what could have been. 4 years ago, he'd been on the cusp of a brilliant career, a rising star in ancient history. Then came the accusation, a fabricated scandal, a vicious academic smear that had crushed his dreams overnight. He was Leo Rossi, the disgraced historian, now just a tour guide, his brilliance hidden beneath a worn uniform and a practiced smile. Someone is watching, but why? High above the glittering tapestry of Rome's night sky, in a penthouse suite that felt more like a minimalist art installation than a hotel room, Elias Thorne reviewed a dossier. The tablet in his hands glowed, illuminating Leo Rossi's face, then details of his academic past, the scandal, his current meager earnings. Thorne's expression was one of quiet, intense focus. He picked up his phone, the device sleek and unassuming. "Prepare the package," he instructed, his voice a calm, low baritone, "and ensure it reaches him through a third party, discreetly." He ended the call, his gaze returning to the city lights, a subtle, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. On the digital dossier, a stylized falcon crest glinted. How much can one person endure before they break? The Roman sun beat down, a relentless anvil striking the Colosseum's ancient stones. Leo Rossi, sweat beading on his brow beneath the brim of his worn cap, tried to project enthusiasm. And here, amici, we imagine the roar of the crowd, the clash of gladiatorial steel. Oh, for heaven's sake, are we done yet? Mrs. Albright, a woman whose entire existence seemed predicated on discomfort, fanned herself with a crumpled map. "It's simply too hot. And frankly, your facts are rather dry, darling. And did the brochure mention the asterisk crowds?" Leo offered a practiced, weary smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're almost at the exit, Signora. Just a few more moments to appreciate the majesty of human endeavor." He spoke with a quiet, professional calm, the kind that came from years of absorbing casual condescension. In the distance, near an archway, a man in a simple dark suit, Elias Thorne, paused. His gaze, unreadable as ever, was fixed on Leo. What if your deepest passion was the key to your future? Ignoring Mrs. Albright's theatrical sigh, Leo found himself drifting towards a less trodden path, a crumbling corner where a forgotten altar lay. "But it wasn't just emperors and gladiators, you see," he began, his voice losing its rehearsed cadence, gaining a resonant warmth. "Rome was built on families, on rivalries, on legacies that stretched back before the Republic itself. Take the Bellini and Valerius families, for instance." A few tourists, drawn by the sudden shift in his tone, leaned in. Leo's hands began to move, sketching invisible frescoes in the air. They were intertwined for centuries, their histories a tapestry of bronze and blood. It's rumored that their ancient feud began over a lost Etruscan diadem, a crown of pure gold adorned with amber and obsidian, believed to have belonged to a priestess of Voltumna, a symbol not just of wealth, but of divine favor, of a lineage that touched the very gods. His eyes, usually dulled by routine, now sparkled with the fire of a true scholar. He wasn't just recounting history, he was reliving it. In the shadow of a broken column, Elias Thorne leaned forward, a flicker of something akin to recognition in his intense gaze. He was no longer just observing a tour guide. He was listening to a lost masterpiece. A stranger leaves you a mysterious package. Do you open it? The tour finally ended, a flurry of hurried goodbyes and perfunctory tips. As Leo gathered his things, Marco, a fellow guide with a perpetually bewildered expression, approached. "Leo, hey, this is for you." He held out a sleek black envelope. It was heavy, made of an expensive, almost silken cardstock, sealed with a distinctive silver falcon crest. "Some quiet guy, dressed like a ghost but drove a car like a senator, asked me to give it to you personally. Said he forgot." Marco shrugged, clearly perplexed. Leo took the envelope, a strange unease settling in his stomach. Across the bustling square, a dark, impossibly smooth luxury car pulled away from the curb, quickly vanishing into the Roman traffic. What if a reclusive billionaire invited you on his private jet? Leo found a quiet bench overlooking the city, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery hues, a stark contrast to the sudden chill in his stomach. His fingers, trembling slightly, broke the elegant silver seal. Inside, 2 items. First, a business card. Thick and black, the falcon crest embossed at the top. Below, in minimalist silver lettering, Elias Thorne, CEO, Thorne Global Initiatives. Leo's breath hitched. Thorne Global Initiatives. A titan in aerospace, AI, and digital heritage. Elias Thorne was a legend, a reclusive genius whose name occasionally surfaced in hushed whispers of unprecedented innovation and vast wealth. That was the quiet man from the forum. It felt impossible. The second item stole his breath entirely. A reservation confirmation for a private jet, a Gulfstream G650, departing from Rome Ciampino tomorrow at noon. Destination, Zurich. Passenger name, Leo Rossi. Tucked into the fold was a small, matching black note, the handwriting sharp and decisive. "Signor Rossi, a mind like yours belongs in history, not merely recounting it. A car will be waiting for you at your address tomorrow at 10 a.m. Your seat will be waiting. This is not a request, it's an opportunity." The paper felt like a live thing in his hands, a portal to a world he'd only ever read about. A joke? A cruel prank? But how could they know his address? "Your best friend says it's a trap. Do you listen?" When Leo burst into their tiny Trastevere apartment, Maya was on the phone, a legal brief spread across the coffee table. "Whoa, you look like you've seen a ghost, or maybe just a Roman sewer rat," she joked, looking up. Leo didn't speak. He just laid the contents of the envelope on the table. Maya picked up the card, her eyes widening. "Thorne Global? Isn't that?" She read the note, then looked at the ticket. Her mouth fell open. "Leo, what is this?" "I don't know," Leo whispered, sinking onto the worn couch. "It's insane. He was there, at the Colosseum, the quiet man." Maya's initial shock quickly morphed into deep-seated suspicion. "Okay, hold on. A strange billionaire leaves you a private jet ticket to Zurich? Leo, this is every red flag in the book. This is how horror movies start. Human trafficking, a weird cult, some kind of creepy, pretty woman fantasy. You cannot be serious." I know, Leo said, running a hand through his hair. "It's crazy, but the note, 'A mind like yours belongs in history, not merely recounting it,' he saw. He heard." Maya threw her hands up, pacing the cramped living room. "That's it? He heard you talk about Etruscan jewelry? For all you know, this guy has some bizarre fetish for ancient history nerds. You don't know anything about him. He's Elias Thorne, Maya. He's one of the most famous, powerful men in the world. He's not some random creep." Rich people can be the biggest creeps of all, Maya shot back. And how did he get your address? That's what I want to know. That's not just observant. That's investigative. It's stalker-level stuff. The question hung heavy in the air, chilling Leo to the bone. How indeed? What do you risk for a chance to reclaim your lost dreams? Leo lay awake that night, the black envelope clutched in his hand. The words of Thorne's note echoed in his mind, cutting through the fear Maya had instilled. Comes a mind like yours belongs in history, not merely recounting it. He thought of the dusty textbooks in the corner of his room, the framed, faded degree from the University of Rome that was now just a bitter reminder of a life stolen. He remembered the shame, the false accusations that had shattered his academic career, forcing him into this purgatory of tourist groups and canned speeches. His current life was safe, predictable, and slowly suffocating him. The smell of cheap coffee and exhaust fumes was the perfume of his existence. But this ticket, this impossible note, was a doorway. A doorway back to the intellectual life, to the challenge, to the purpose that had been ripped away. It was a chance, perhaps his only chance, at redemption. At using the mind he had trained, the passion he had suppressed. The fear was real, Maya's warnings logical. But the pull of that lost world, the intoxicating possibility of escape, was stronger. It was the most terrifying decision of his life. Sometimes, the most terrifying choice is the only way forward. The next morning was a whirlwind of anxiety and adrenaline. I have to go, Maya, Leo said, his voice quiet but firm as she stood, arms crossed, watching him pack his meager belongings. I have to know what this is. Maya sighed, her expression a storm of worry. I ran a background check on him, or tried to. He's a ghost. No scandals, just business articles and philanthropy. He's either a saint or very, very good at hiding things. Maybe he's just private, Leo offered, trying to convince himself as much as her. Private people don't summon tour guides to Zurich with anonymous notes, Maya shot back. I'm serious, Leo. I've put a tracking app on your phone. Don't you dare turn it off. And I want you to check in with me every 3 hours. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling the embassy, Interpol, the Carabinieri. I swear to God. Leo hugged his friend tightly, grateful for her fierce loyalty. I'll be careful, I promise. He called his manager at the tour company, his voice shaking as he left a message, quitting his job. The thought, which would have terrified him yesterday, felt strangely liberating today. The car is here. Are you ready to go? At precisely 10 a.m., a sleek black Mercedes-Benz S-Class sedan, so silent it seemed to materialize from the morning haze, pulled up to their apartment building. A chauffeur in a crisp black suit stepped out and opened the rear door. He didn't ask for his name. He simply nodded and said, Signor Rossi, we are ready when you are. Leo shared one last, tight hug with Maya, a silent promise in their embrace. He picked up his old, scuffed suitcase, a stark contrast to the gleaming vehicle, and stepped inside. The door closed with a soft, decisive thud, sealing him in. The journey had begun. What does it feel like to leave everything you know behind? The ride to Rome Ciampino Airport was silent and smooth. They didn't go to the main terminal, but to a private executive hangar. There, gleaming on the tarmac, was the Gulfstream G650. It was a vision of power and grace, larger and more imposing than he could have ever imagined. A flight attendant with a warm, professional smile greeted him at the steps. Welcome aboard, Signor Rossi. Mr. Thorne has arranged everything for your comfort. May I take your bag? The interior was a study in understated luxury, cream leather seats, polished mahogany, subtle silver accents echoing the falcon crest. He was the only passenger. As the jet taxied down the runway, Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the point of no return. The engines roared, and the plane surged forward with incredible force, pressing him back into his plush seat. Within moments they were airborne, climbing steeply into the clouds. Below him, Rome shrank. The Colosseum, his apartment, his old life, all of it vanishing into a haze. He was untethered, suspended between the world he knew and a future that was a complete and terrifying unknown. The world is changing beneath you. What waits on the other side? Hours later, Leo gazed out the window of the private jet. Clouds parted to reveal the majestic snow-capped peaks of the Alps, piercing the azure sky. It was a vista of breathtaking grandeur, yet it felt distant, unreal. He sipped from a glass of chilled mineral water, the surreal nature of the journey weighing on him. He, Leo Rossi, the disgraced historian-turned-tour guide, was flying across Europe on a billionaire's private jet. It felt like a dream, one he half expected to wake from, back to the insistent ring of his alarm in his tiny Roman bedroom. A growing sense of anticipation, a nervous flutter of hope, mixed with the lingering doubt Maya had sown. What awaited him in Zurich? What could a man like Elias Thorne possibly want with him? The jet began its slow descent, a new landscape unfurling below. What secrets lie hidden in the heart of a billionaire's fortress? The black Mercedes-Benz S-Class glided through winding alpine roads, the silent chauffeur navigating with practiced ease. Leo Rossi, pressed into the plush leather, watched the jagged peaks of the Swiss Alps pierce a sky bruised with the last rays of sunset. He felt impossibly small, a forgotten footnote in a vast ancient saga, now hurtling towards an unknown chapter. The car pulled up to a structure that seemed to grow organically from the mountain itself. A sprawling, minimalist modern villa of glass and steel, its angles sharp against the dramatic landscape. Light spilled from its panoramic windows, promising warmth but radiating an aura of formidable power. As the car door opened, a figure emerged from the glow. It was Elias Thorne. He wore a simple charcoal turtleneck and dark trousers, the cashmere clinging to a lean, athletic frame. There was no ostentatious display, yet the quiet authority he exuded was more potent than any uniform. His eyes, the same piercing gray Leo remembered from the diner, held a calm intensity that made Leo's palms sweat. "Mr. Rossi," Thorne said, his voice a low, steady baritone devoid of judgment or surprise. "Welcome to Zurich. I trust your journey was comfortable." Leo swallowed, the words catching in his throat. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Thorne." He managed a stiff nod, feeling the overwhelming weight of the moment, the sheer unreality of standing before this titan in a place that felt like a dream. Thorne offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile, then gestured towards the villa's grand entrance. "Please, come in. There's much to discuss. A priceless artifact, an ancient feud, and you're caught in the middle." Thorne led Leo through a cavernous, art-filled hallway into a vast study. Towering bookshelves lined every wall, laden not just with leather-bound tomes, but ancient scrolls, meticulously catalogued manuscripts, and intricate antique maps that hinted at forgotten empires. A globe of the heavens, studded with constellations, stood sentinel in one corner. This was no mere office. It was a sanctuary of knowledge, a testament to a mind that valued legacy as much as profit. Thorne settled into a deep leather armchair, indicating another for Leo. "You are here, Mr. Rossi," he began, his voice calm, direct, "because of a problem that traditional methods have failed to solve, and one that requires a unique understanding of history, culture, and the human heart." He paused, his gaze sweeping over Leo. For centuries, two of Rome's oldest and most influential families, the Bellini and the Valerius, have been locked in a bitter feud. A feud that, for the last 50 years, has centered on a single, priceless object, an Etruscan diadem. Thorne gestured to a sleek, transparent tablet on his desk. An image shimmered into existence, a breathtaking golden headpiece, intricately worked with mythological figures, radiating an aura of profound antiquity. "This diadem," Thorne continued, "is more than just a piece of jewelry. It is a symbol, a potent relic of their shared, yet deeply divisive, past. I intend to acquire the rights to this diadem, not for profit, Mr. Rossi, but for preservation, for digital exhibition, to share its story with the world. My teams have offered them vast sums, legal frameworks, cultural partnerships. All have failed. The families are deadlocked. They would rather see it crumble than share it, even with each other." The weight of his words settled on Leo, heavy and immediate. This was bigger than any tour, any lecture. This was history, alive and bleeding. When the stakes are this high, can an outsider truly succeed? Before Leo could fully process the gravity of Thorne's revelation, the study doors swung open with a soft twanin doors. A woman entered, her heels clicking decisively on the polished parquet floor. She was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit that spoke of power and precision. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, shining chignon, and her eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept over the room, pausing briefly, dismissively on Leo. This was not a pleasant interruption. "Alexander," she said, her voice crisp, laced with an accent that was a hybrid of British boarding school and American corporate law. "You're late for the Q3 forecast review, and you've brought company." Her gaze returned to Leo, a flicker of something akin to annoyance crossing her features. "Is this him, the tour guide?" Thorne's face remained impassive. "Dr. Anya Sharma," he introduced. "This is Leo Rossi. Anya is my chief operating officer." He turned to Anya. "Anya, this is the man I believe can finally resolve the Bellini-Valerius impasse." Anya offered a smile that was as sharp and cold as a shard of glass. "A pleasure, Mr. Rossi," she said, though her tone conveyed anything but. "Though I confess, Alexander, I still don't quite understand the purpose of this experiment. We have exhausted every conventional avenue. Bringing in a historian with no corporate experience feels less like innovation and more like desperate romanticism." Her words, though directed at Thorne, landed on Leo like a physical blow. He felt the familiar, burning sting of dismissal, of being reduced to his lowest point. Can a forgotten expert prove their worth against a titan of industry? Anya turned her full, analytical attention to Leo, her eyes narrowing. "Mr. Rossi," she began, her tone sharper now, "with all due respect, your resume, as I understand it, lists tour guide and disgraced academic. Our corporate mediation teams, composed of the finest lawyers, negotiators, and cultural liaisons money can buy, have failed. What exactly do you, a man who recounts ancient facts for tourists, believe you can bring to a multi-million-euro acquisition deal?" The insult landed, raw and immediate. It was the same condescension he'd faced when his academic career imploded, when his integrity was questioned, when his passion was deemed worthless. She suggested that the Bellini and Valerius families weren't culturally misunderstood. They were simply stubborn, entrenched in their irrational pride. "We've presented them with every logical argument, every financial incentive," she stated, crossing her arms. "They simply refuse to see reason." Leo felt a surge of heat in his chest, a flicker of defiance igniting within the long dormant embers of his scholarly pride. He clenched his fists, the familiar shame battling with a sudden, desperate urge to prove her wrong. He wasn't just a tour guide. He was a historian. He saw things they couldn't. What if the solution isn't about numbers, but about stories? Leo took a deep breath, pushing past the sting of Anya's words. He looked from her skeptical, challenging gaze to Thorne's quiet, expectant one. "Dr. Sharma," he began, his voice, though still slightly trembling, gaining a quiet authority. "Respectfully, the problem isn't that the families are stubborn. It's that your teams have been speaking the wrong language." Anya raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "We have dozens of translators, Mr. Rossi. We've used every dialect of Italian imaginable." "Not the language of words," Leo corrected, his gaze locking onto hers, "but the language of meaning. The Bellini and Valerius families don't speak of market value or profit sharing. They speak of panolegacy, of asterisk honor, of asterisk ancient grievance and perceived betrayal that stretches back centuries, long before either of their families held their current wealth. These aren't business negotiations, they are echoes of ancient rivalries, rooted in the very soil of Rome." He leaned forward, his passion overriding his nerves. "My historical expertise, my understanding of these deep-seated cultural narratives, is not a handicap, Dr. Sharma. It is the only bridge that can span such a chasm." Thorne nodded slowly, a subtle affirmation that seemed to confirm something he had already known. Anya, however, remained silent, though a faint, almost imperceptible shift in her analytical expression suggested a crack in her pragmatic facade. "This isn't a job. It's a test. And failure means losing everything." Thorne finally broke the silence, his gaze fixed on Leo. "Precisely. Dr. Sharma's teams have exhausted the language of numbers. You, Mr. Rossi, speak the language of history. This is not a request. It's an opportunity. And it is, for all intents and purposes, a job interview. He paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. I want you to lead the mediation team for the Bellini-Valerius conflict for 1 week. You will have access to all our resources, all our intelligence. If you succeed in bringing these families to an agreement that allows for the preservation and exhibition of the Etruscan diadem, I will create a permanent position for you at Thorne Global as Director of Cultural Heritage Initiatives. A generous salary, a housing allowance in Rome, and full funding to complete your research and publish your works. A new life, Mr. Rossi. A career that utilizes your actual, formidable talents. Leo's breath hitched. A new life. Funding for his research. It was everything he had lost. Everything he had yearned for. And if I fail? Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper. Anya answered before Thorne could, her tone devoid of warmth. If you fail, Mr. Rossi, a car will take you back to Zurich Airport, and you will be on the next flight back to Rome. You can return to your tour guide job. We will, of course, compensate you for your time. The shadow of her disapproval hung heavy, a stark reminder of the abyss that awaited him. He said yes. What happens now? The silence in the study was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of the villa's systems. Leo looked from Thorne's open, expectant hand to Anya's cold, unwavering gaze, then back to the billionaire who held his entire future in the balance. The choice was stark: return to the suffocating mediocrity of his old life, or leap into an impossible challenge that promised redemption or utter failure. He thought of the dusty textbooks in his cramped Trastevere apartment, the dreams that had been crushed, the talent that had been wasted. He thought of the sting of Anya's words, a mirror to his own past shame. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to reclaim himself, to prove his worth not just to them, but to himself. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the weight of his past and the terrifying promise of his future pressing down on him. I accept, Leo said, his voice firm, resolute. Thorne's faint smile broadened, a flicker of genuine satisfaction in his eyes. He extended his hand, and Leo met it, a silent, powerful agreement passing between them. Anya's eyes narrowed, but even she couldn't deny the momentousness of the decision. The gamble was set. The game had begun. Can a historian learn the language of billionaires in days? The next 2 days were a blur of high-octane information, a brutal immersion into a world Leo had only glimpsed from dusty library archives. His temporary office in Thorne's villa was sleek, minimalist, and impossibly efficient, a stark contrast to his cluttered Trastevere apartment. He was buried under an avalanche of files, legal reports detailing centuries of property disputes, financial breakdowns of Thorne Global's acquisition strategies, and thick dossiers on the Bellini and Valerius families, far more comprehensive than any historical text. Dr. Anya Sharma, sharp and impeccably dressed, was a constant, formidable presence. She'd lean against the doorway, arms crossed, her eyes sweeping over the documents on his desk, then him. "Do you understand our EBITDA projections, Mr. Rossi?" she'd ask, her tone crisp, a subtle challenge in her voice. "Or the implications of the current regulatory landscape?" Leo, honest to a fault, would admit, "No, not entirely, Dr. Sharma. But I understand the asterisk implications of a blood feud that spans 2 millennia. Perhaps that is more relevant than quarterly earnings in this particular negotiation." Anya would offer a tight, almost imperceptible nod, her skepticism slightly, ever so slightly, lessened. Some feuds run deeper than anyone knows. How far back does this one go? As Anya focused on the numbers, Leo delved into what he knew best: history. He pored over the Bellini and Valerius family histories, tracing their lineages back through the Renaissance, the Dark Ages, and even into the dim, forgotten past of ancient Rome. He discovered not just a rivalry, but a complex tapestry of interwoven fates. There were periods of bitter conflict, yes, but also surprising instances of alliance, of shared sacrifice. He found echoes of ancient Roman rivalries, the patrician families vying for influence, their honor paramount, their perceived slights burning for generations. The diadem, he realized, wasn't merely a point of contention. It was a symbol, a lightning rod for centuries of unaddressed grievances, of pride wounded and honor misunderstood. The feud wasn't about the artifact's monetary value, not truly. It was about something far more fundamental: respect, identity, and a profound, almost primal sense of perceived betrayal. What if a forgotten treasure held the key to peace? Leo shifted his focus to the Etruscan diadem itself. He immersed himself in digital archives, poring over scholarly articles, archaeological reports, and even ancient mythological texts. The diadem, he learned, wasn't just a beautiful piece of gold and jewels. It was a potent symbol. It was believed to have been worn by a high priestess, a bridge between the mortal and divine, imbued with the spirit of the Etruscan ancestors. It represented ancient power, lineage, and a shared, albeit lost, heritage that predated Rome itself. For the Bellini and Valerius families, it wasn't just an heirloom. It was a tangible link to their deepest roots, a sacred relic. Leo saw it then. The diadem wasn't a wedge driving them apart. It was, paradoxically, a potential bridge, a shared point of reverence, if only its true story could be told, its ancient symbolism rediscovered and honored. It wasn't about who owned it, but what it represented to them all. A strategy began to form. The stage is set. But is he ready? The morning of the meeting arrived with a palpable hum of nervous energy. A stylist, dispatched by Thorne, appeared in Leo's room, a whirlwind of tape measures and garment bags. Understated elegance, Signor Rossi, she advised in rapid Italian, holding up a classic Navy Italian suit. Respectful, it speaks of tradition, not ostentation. Leo looked at himself in the mirror, the tailored fabric feeling alien yet strangely empowering. The worn jeans and faded t-shirts of his tour guide life were gone, replaced by the crisp lines of a suit that felt like a uniform for a different kind of battle. It was surreal, stepping into this new skin, this new role. A strange mix of discomfort at the unfamiliarity and a burgeoning confidence, a quiet resolve, settled within him. He wasn't just Leo, the disgraced historian. He was Leo, the man with a purpose. Walk into a lion's den. What's your first move? The sleek black Mercedes-Benz glided through the bustling streets of Rome, pulling up silently before an imposing set of ornate iron gates. Beyond them, a grand historic palazzo, its ancient stone glowing golden in the morning sun, stood as the battleground. Elias Thorne, calm as ever, gave Leo a brief, reassuring nod as they exited the car. "Remember what you know, Leo?" he said, his voice a low murmur. Anya, ever pragmatic, offered a curt, "Good luck, Mr. Rossi," her gaze sharp. Leo felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him, the echoes of countless conflicts that had played out in these very streets. His breath hitched, but he straightened his shoulders. This wasn't just about a deal. It was about the very soul of history and his place within it. He felt the weight of the moment as they walked through the marble foyer, the silence inside the palazzo even more intimidating than the throngs outside. Two ancient families, one room, decades of hatred. Who blinks first? They were led into a vast, formal salon, opulent yet heavy with an unspoken tension. Seated opposite them were the two formidable heads of the families, flanked by their respective lawyers. Signora Bellini, matriarch of her ancient house, was a woman of formidable presence. Her silver hair coiled in an elegant chignon, her eyes sharp and unyielding. She sat with regal posture, a silk scarf draped over her shoulders like a shield. Across from her, Signor Valerius, patriarch of his rival clan, was a stern-faced man in his late 60s, his expression proud and unyielding, his hands clasped tightly on his walking stick. Introductions were made, Leo introduced simply as part of our cultural liaison team. Their greetings were cold, wary, and devoid of any warmth. Neither Bellini nor Valerius made eye contact with the other. The unspoken animosity, a palpable force in the room, thick enough to cut with a knife. When money isn't enough, what truly moves people? The meeting began, and as Leo had predicted, it was a disaster. Anya Sharma, Thorne's COO, took the lead. She launched into a slick, data-driven presentation, her voice crisp and precise. Slides flashed across a hidden screen, filled with charts on market value, projections of global reach, and intricate legal frameworks for joint ownership. She spoke of profit sharing, of brand synergy, of the financial wisdom of Thorne Global's involvement. Signora Bellini listened, her face an unreadable mask of polite disdain. Signor Valerius's jaw remained stubbornly set. After 20 minutes, Signora Bellini held up a delicate, age-spotted hand. "Enough, Dottoressa Sharma," she said, her voice soft but imbued with centuries of authority. "You speak of numbers, of vulgar commerce. You understand nothing of our legacy." Signor Valerius nodded, a rare moment of agreement between the two. "Your words lack understanding, Dottoressa. This is not a commodity. The deal is dead. Or is it?" Anya's professional smile tightened, but she pressed on, attempting to pivot to the family's long-term financial security. It was futile. The discussion devolved quickly, spiraling into veiled insults and dredging up historical grievances. "The Bellini have always preferred profit to honor," Signor Valerius declared, his voice rising. "And the Valerius have always mistaken stubbornness for principle," Signora Bellini retorted, her eyes flashing. Both families refused to yield, seeing Thorne's offer, no matter how well-intentioned, as an insult to their ancient legacy, a crass attempt to monetize what was sacred. The lawyers shuffled their papers nervously. Thorne remained silent, his gaze analytical, observing the predictable failure. The meeting was on the verge of collapsing entirely, a stalemate as ancient and unyielding as the city outside. Leo felt a desperate, urgent need to act, his heart pounding in his chest. What if the answer was hidden in plain sight all along? Leo remained silent, watching, listening intently. His gaze swept the opulent room, taking in the small details others missed. He noticed Signora Bellini's hand, unconsciously, almost reverently, resting on a small, intricately carved wooden box on the table beside her, bearing a specific, ancient family crest. Then his eyes drifted to Signor Valerius, whose stern gaze kept returning to an old, faded map of ancient Roman territories hanging on the wall behind Signora Bellini. It wasn't the diadem itself that held their attention, not purely. It was the symbols of their deeper heritage, their shared, complex past. The solution, Leo realized with a sudden, electrifying clarity, lay not in the future, not in a corporate merger, but buried deep within their shared history. He caught Thorne's eye across the room. Elias Thorne gave the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. Permission. 120's one silent signal. One last chance. Asterisk. The air in the formal salon was thick, not just with the scent of aged wood and expensive upholstery, but with a palpable tension that promised to snap. Elias Thorne, impassive as ever, sat across from Leo, his gaze steady. Leo felt the weight of the moment, the desperate urge to act. The Bellini and Valerius families were entrenched, their lawyers packing their briefcases, their faces set in grim certainty. It was over. He looked at Thorne, across the expanse of the polished table, and caught his eye. A silent conversation passed between them, a question from Leo, a fleeting flicker of trust from the billionaire. Thorne gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture so subtle it could have been missed by anyone not looking for it. It was permission. A single, silent signal. Leo took a deep, steadying breath, the scent of old parchment and simmering resentment filling his lungs. This was it. He spoke, and the room fell silent. What did he say? Asterisk. Underscore perdono l'interruzione underscore. Leo began, his voice quiet but clear, cutting through the murmurs of departure. Underscore. Ma forse stiamo parlando linguaggi diversi underscore. Pardon the interruption, but perhaps we are speaking different languages. The room, which had been on the verge of splintering, fell into an astonished silence. All eyes turned to Leo. He stood, not moving towards the negotiating table, but instead walked towards the corner of the salon, where the old, faded map of ancient Roman territories hung, near the small pedestal holding the Bellini family crest. He spoke in flawless, colloquial Italian, the kind he'd grown up hearing in the narrow streets of Trastevere, not the formal, academic Italian of his disgraced past. He didn't gesture wildly, but his presence was commanding. This map, he continued, underscore, non è solo un pezzo di carta. Racconta una storia. Underscore. This is not just a piece of paper. It tells a story. He traced a finger along a forgotten border. And this crest. He motioned towards the Bellini emblem. Underscore. Non è solo un simbolo di famiglia. È un eco di un'alleanza dimenticata. Underscore. It is not just a family symbol. It is an echo of a forgotten alliance. He looked from Signora Bellini's startled face to Signor Valerius's rigid one, then began to recount a forgotten tale, a whisper from the very stones beneath their feet. Their greatest enemy was themselves. But their history held the truth. Asterisk. Centuries ago, Leo's voice filled the room, weaving a tapestry of bronze and blood. Underscore. Quando Roma stessa era ancora una giovane leonessa, I vostri antenati non erano solo rivali. Erano, per un breve ma cruciale periodo, alleati. Underscore. When Rome itself was still a young lioness, your ancestors were not just rivals. They were, for a brief but crucial period, allies. He spoke of the Gallic sack of Rome, a time of utter devastation, and how the nascent Bellini and Valerius clans, then smaller, warring tribes on the periphery, had put aside their petty squabbles. They had united their forces, not for conquest but for survival, defending their shared lands and families against a common barbarian foe. It was after this, Leo explained, his gaze intense, underscore, che il diadema etrusco, quello che oggi dividete, fu creato, underscore. That the Etruscan diadem, the one you divide today, was created. He projected a stunning 3D rendering of the diadem onto a screen, its bronze and gold shimmering. It was not merely a treasure, he emphasized, but a symbol, a testament to a truce, a promise. Its true power, underscore la sua vera forza, underscore lies not in its individual pieces, but in the unity it once represented. It was a bridge built between your houses, a symbol that even ancient rivals could find common ground. A lump formed in Signora Bellini's throat. Can ancient history heal modern wounds? Asterisk. Signora Bellini, whose face had been a mask of regal disdain moments before, now listened intently, her eyes wide with a recognition that seemed to pierce through generations of animosity. Signor Valerius, equally captivated, leaned forward, his stern expression softening, a hint of something akin to wistful regret in his gaze. They exchanged tentative glances, a silent acknowledgement of a shared, forgotten truth. Leo seized the moment. Underscore Signora Bellini, Signor Valerius. Underscore, he continued, his voice resonating with empathy. Mr. Thorne does not seek to exploit your legacy. He seeks to preserve it. To share this incredible story of unity. This testament to your ancestors, courage, with a world that has forgotten the power of such alliances. He sees the diadem not as an object of division, but as a bridge that can connect the past to the future, and perhaps your two families once more. The quiet in the room was profound, no longer tense, but contemplative. For the first time, the possibility of a path forward, a way to honor their past without endless conflict, seemed to bloom. He just did the impossible. No one saw it coming. Asterisk. Dr. Anya Sharma stared at Leo, her impeccably composed facade shattered. Her mouth was slightly agape, her sharp, analytical eyes wide with utter disbelief. Her skepticism, so palpable minutes before, had been replaced by a stunned silence. Elias Thorne, however, offered Leo a small, genuine smile. It was a look of profound appraisal, a silent testament to Leo's success. The room's other occupants, the lawyers, the assistants, were bewildered, shuffling their papers, unsure how to react to this sudden dramatic shift in atmosphere. Leo had bypassed all their legal frameworks, all their financial projections, and spoken directly to the heart of the matter, to the very soul of the family's rivalry. He had found the foundation, just as Thorne had always believed he would. Anya shook her head almost imperceptibly, a grudging acknowledgement of the impossible. The impossible deal is back on the table. But how? Asterisk. Signora Bellini was the first to speak, her voice still regal, but now tinged with a new, thoughtful quality. Underscore, force. Underscore, she said, her eyes fixed on Leo. Underscore, forse possiamo prendere un tè la prossima settimana. senza avvocati, senza presentazioni, underscore. Perhaps we can have tea next week. Without lawyers. Without presentations. Signor Valerius, after a moment of consideration, nodded slowly. Underscore, accetto. Underscore, he stated. Underscore. Ma solo se il signor Rossi è presente. Underscore, I accept. But only if Signor Rossi is present. Elias Thorne's expression remained calm, but a subtle satisfaction played on his lips. He gave a quiet nod of assent. Progress. Real progress. The deal, which had been dead, was now miraculously, unexpectedly, back on the table. As they walked back to the car, the air felt lighter. Leo, still processing the whirlwind of his impromptu speech, felt a quiet satisfaction settle over him. He had spoken the unspoken language, and for the first time in years, he felt truly seen. What if the road to respect wasn't paved with grand gestures, but with quiet admissions? The Mercedes sedan glided through the Roman traffic, a stark contrast to the buzzing excitement within. Dr. Anya Sharma, usually so composed, stared out the tinted window, her jaw tight. "I confess," she said, her voice crisp, lacking its usual dismissive edge. "Your unconventional approach yielded results where our standard methods failed." It was not an apology, but for Anya it was as close as she got. Elias Thorne, seated opposite Leo, offered a small, approving smile. "You saw the problem, Leo. Not as a financial deadlock, but as a historical wound. That insight is rarer than any quarterly report." Leo felt a quiet warmth spread through him, a sensation he hadn't known in years. It wasn't just a validation from Thorne, or even Anya's grudging respect. It was the return of something deeper, a sense of his own worth, a purpose that had been buried under years of forgotten dreams. He was no longer just a disgraced historian. He was a bridge. He didn't just translate words, he translated hearts. The following week, the atmosphere in the private salon of the Palazzo was transformed. No lawyers, no presentations, just the soft clinking of teacups and the rich aroma of espresso. Leo, seated between Signora Bellini and Signor Valerius, was a conduit, a whisperer of intent. When Thorne spoke of glued digital platforms for global reach, Leo translated it not as market expansion, but as a digital forum where the legacy of your ancestors can be shared with a world eager to learn. When Signora Bellini spoke of the sanctity of tradition, Leo reframed it for Thorne as, quote, the invaluable authenticity that cannot be replicated, only protected. They talked for hours, not of profit margins or legal clauses, but of the Etruscan kings, of the Renaissance artists who had once graced these very walls, of the shared Roman soil beneath their feet. Laughter, tentative at first, then genuine, began to ripple through the room. A fragile understanding, born of shared history and mutual respect, began to knit itself between the two ancient families. The diadem, once a symbol of division, was slowly becoming a testament to unity. The impossible deal is done. But for Leo, it's just the beginning. Later that week, back at Thorne's villa, the final contract was signed. It was a groundbreaking agreement, establishing shared ownership and cultural preservation of the Etruscan diadem. The Bellini and Valerius families, once bitter adversaries, now stood together, agreeing to co-manage its exhibition and ongoing research, their names forever linked in a new chapter of shared heritage. Thorne, ever the visionary, offered both Signora Bellini and Signor Valerius lifetime positions on an advisory board dedicated to cultural preservation, ensuring their legacy would be honored within his global initiatives. Relief, profound and palpable, filled the air. Anya, though still pragmatic, allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval in Leo's direction. For Elias Thorne, it was a triumph of an unconventional strategy. For Leo, it was the culmination of something far more personal. He had not just brokered a deal, he had helped mend a wound centuries old, using the very knowledge that had once been his downfall. From forgotten past to limitless future. What's next? That evening, a small, celebratory dinner was held at Thorne's villa. Leo, a glass of exquisite local wine in hand, found himself on a sweeping balcony, gazing out at the twinkling lights of the alpine villages below. The crisp mountain air felt invigorating, a cleansing breath after the stale air of his old life. He thought of the dusty textbooks, the endless tours, the slow, suffocating erosion of his spirit. Now, the weight was gone. He was no longer the disgraced historian, nor merely the tour guide. He was Leo Rossi, a man who had found his voice, who had proven that the whispers of the past could, indeed, mend the fractures of the present. A profound sense of peace settled over him, mingling with an exhilarating awareness of purpose. This magnificent, isolated fortress no longer felt alien. It felt, in a strange, exhilarating way, like home. "The dream job is yours. Do you take it?" Elias Thorne stepped onto the balcony, his presence as quiet and commanding as ever. "Leo," he said, his voice a low baritone, "I believe I owe you a new life." He turned to face him, his intense gaze unwavering. "The offer I made stands." Director of Cultural Heritage Initiatives. A very generous salary, a housing allowance here in Rome, and a blank check for your research. It's yours, no interview required. Just tell me when you're ready to start. It was everything Leo had ever dreamed of, amplified 1,000-fold. A return to academia, but with resources and influence he could never have imagined. A life of purpose, handed to him on a silver platter. The pathway to redemption, laid out, clear and undeniable. He just turned down a billionaire. What did he ask for instead? Leo looked at Thorne, a flicker of amusement in his own eyes. "Thank you, Elias," he said, using Thorne's first name for the first time, his voice calm and steady. "It's an incredible offer, truly. But I have a counter-proposal." Thorne raised an eyebrow, a hint of surprise in his expression. "I'm listening." "I don't want the job as a gift," Leo continued, his newfound confidence radiating. "And I don't want you to pay for my research. I want you to invest in me, not as an employee you discovered, but as a partner you value." He took a breath, feeling the words solidify his resolve. "I want to lead a new division, ancient heritage integration, with a performance-based stake. Give me a budget and a team, and if I succeed in establishing 3 major cultural preservation projects within 2 years, I get a percentage of the subsidiary's valuation, and I'll fund my own research from the salary you give me." He was asking for responsibility, not a reward. He was asking for a chance to build something himself, to truly earn his place. He didn't just find a job, he found himself. Elias Thorne stared at Leo, his analytical gaze replaced by one of genuine astonishment. Then, slowly, a broad, brilliant smile spread across his face. The first Leo had truly seen. He let out a soft laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "A disgraced historian who was just a tour guide a week ago is now negotiating equity with me on a multi-billion-dollar cultural initiative," he said, a note of profound admiration in his voice. "I knew my instincts were right about you, Leo Rossi. I just had no idea how right." He extended his hand. "You have a deal. Welcome to Thorne Global Initiatives." Leo shook his hand, a current of electricity passing between them. It wasn't just a contract, it was the closing of one chapter of his life and the explosive beginning of another. He was no longer a historian defined by his past, but a leader shaping the future. And he was finally, truly home.